World Talks. I'm your host, Sasha Farbach. Now, the Catholic world is watching as a new conclave begins. Cardinals from around the globe are gathering to choose the next pope. Now, with big questions about the future of the Church. Now, tradition versus reform, global influence and internal unity. What direction will it all take? Now, to help us break it all down, I'm now joined by Michał, Kłosowski, journalist, author, Vaticanist, Catholic Voices, who's right now in St. Peter's Square. Good to have you on the program. So it's a historic moment. So tell us just briefly, what can we expect today? Today is very, very key. What's going to happen behind closed doors? Give us a short breakdown.
Good morning, and thank you very much for having me. Well, it's a very special day here in the Vatican because today at 10, so just in a few minutes, the Mass, the special Holy Mass will start. The Mass, with intention is going to be the good election of a new Pope. Then, 4:30, the doors of the Sistine Chapel will be locked and the cardinals will start the conclave. The conclave, which is one of the most traditional.
All right, so we have some connection issues here, but we're, I think, back in St. Peter's Square. So you're just going through the timeline here, Michał, but just carrying on with that, I guess one of the big questions is, how long do you foresee this process going on? I mean, they're starting today. Modern elections for the Pope have not been longer than 5 days in the modern times. How do you expect, how long is this process going to go on for?
Well, in my opinion, to be super honest, no one knows. Mostly because, well, the previous elections, the previous conclave, the one which elected Pope Francis and the previous one which elected Pope Benedict XVI, were 48 hours elections, so it was quite quick. The conclave which elected John Paul II was 72 hours, so it was a little bit longer. Obviously, the question is, what do you mean by saying the conclave is long or short? I would say that after 10 days of general congregations which are taking place here in the Vatican in previous days, cardinals were talking a lot, praying a lot, thinking a lot who and how to elect the new pope. So I would say that in 48 or 72 hours we will have a new pope who will appear in the loggia of St. Peter's Basilica, probably somewhere between Friday and Sunday, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, let's also look at another major question here. It's not just for the Church itself, over 1.4 billion Catholic, but what is at stake here for this new pontiff, whoever that will be?
Well, this conclave will be a new beginning because, as Pope Francis said, now we are living not in a change of the not in a time of the change, but in the time of change of the epoch. So the new conclave and the new pontificate will face some very important, challenges, I would say. One of the most obvious is the kind of challenge between global South and Old West. That's one of the most important challenges that the Church also is facing right now, because we do have a lot of cardinals, a lot of believers as well, from those parts of the world we are calling as a periphery. So that's one of the most important terms right now. Also, the reform of Roman Curia is still ongoing because Pope Francis has not been able to finish it before his funeral. Also, there are tensions inside of the Church between the cardinals. So I would say that the new Pope should be a real pontiff, the one who is building bridges instead of building walls, also inside of the Church.
Mm-hmm. Now, you alluded to there that periphery. Many of these cardinal electors, I think around 80% of them, were actually appointed by the late Pope Francis. So looking at these different types of factions, politics is inevitably involved here. Give us your take here from what are these factions and where could a new Pope potentially arise here?
Well, I'm not a huge fan of, putting the political kind of like framework into the Church. Let's call it environment, because I would say that it's not true. There are some groups, let's call them groups, but those are not like political parties or kind of fractions. No, I would say that there are some cardinals who share the same values. Obviously, they are from the same part of the world, for example, from Asia, Africa, but let's remember that the church is a global institution, the global institution in which many cultures, many languages coexist. So I would say that this old division, which takes his origin from the French Revolution, which divides the world into conservatives, liberals, leftists, centrists, etc., just doesn't work for the church. The thing is, well, those who will elect the Pope are the cardinals from many different parts of the world, many different countries, from different environments, even geographically. So I would say that this kind of groups are being formed on a little bit different level, a level of faith, of authority, of influence as well, because it's not only about, electing a new pope who will govern, who will rule the church. It's about electing a person who will influence almost 2 billion Catholics around the world and who will lead them to eternal life. So the stake here is quite high, but I wouldn't be able to make this kind of like division into fractions, groups, political. No, it's not like that. Obviously, there are some groups that are kind of like more or less friendly, but still there are cardinals who are independent and who are voting free option to vote as they want.
Right. I mean, you said politics is not what we're going to comment on, but nevertheless, I want to talk about this influence, and obviously from that Polish influence a bit. I mean, the church is very much important here in this country, in Poland. That kind of, let's say, policy with what the Polish church has followed was a little bit at odds with the late Pope Francis. How do you see the Polish influence here, the Polish cardinals, on the impact of any kind of conclave?
Well, in fact, we do have 4 Polish cardinals who will be voting cardinals here in Vatican during the conclave. And the thing is, look, the Polish influence is quite big, because we had John Paul II, and he is still a very important figure here in the Vatican and in the global church, obviously, because remember, his pontificate was quite long. He's still being cited by many cardinals as well. Many of those cardinals were raised by and during his pontificate, so our influence is still quite high. Mostly because of John Paul II, the story of his pontificate, the authority he still has. But I would say that those 4 Polish cardinals who will be voting, for example, Cardinal Konrad Krajewski, are still important personally here in the Vatican because, for example, Cardinal Konrad Krajewski was one of the most important collaborators of late Pope Francis. So I would say that the Polish voice will be heard here in the Vatican during the conclave quite loudly.
And then just a brief, quick question. We're looking at some of these papabile, these potential names we've been hearing these last weeks. If we're looking at a candidate potentially from outside of Europe, if that's maybe Cardinal Tagle from the Philippines or others from Africa, if someone like that would be selected, how much would that change, let's say, the normal crux of how the church has been proceeding? Is this going to be more conservative? Is this going to be more progressive? How would that impact the church?
Not so much, to be honest, because the church is not divided in the sense of geography. Now, even the Pope from Asia and Africa will be still the Roman pontiff, the Pope from Rome, the Pope of the Roman Catholic Church. So it's not so important from which country the new Pope will be elected. He can be from Asia, from Africa, but there are many voices which are saying that the next Pope will be Italian. Will be Italian because the Italians are super hungry. They really want to have a Pope again because since John Paul II there was no Italian Pope, which is kind of like a disaster for many Italians. And a lot of newspapers, journalists, commentators, Vaticanists as well, are saying that the next Pope will be Cardinal Pietro Parolin. or maybe Cardinal Matteo Zuppi, or Cardinal Pizzaballa. Those are three Italian names which are mentioned many times. And I would say that it's quite possible that one of them will be elected if the conclave will be short. Because if it's going to be a long conclave, then let's expect surprise.
Right. So just to recap on that, I think the shortest was just about 48 hours, and I think the longest was several years. We'll see in the next days if it's going to be a short or a longer one, but we'll, of course, be following the events. Thank you so much for all those insights. Michał Kłosowski there from St. Peter's Square. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
And that concludes World Talks. My name is Sasha Farba, but much more coming up right here on TVP World, so stay tuned. Goodbye.